Yeah, good evening. Pranams to all of you. So we all usually do cooking. You must be thinking, is this session is for cooking? So imagine you are in a kitchen and you are cooking the dinner, and you are going to make a favorite dish, and this dish you have prepared multiple times. So do you need a YouTube video for the recipe, or do you need a cookbook? Obviously no, because you know in and out of how to make that recipe, that dish, and you don't need to measure or weigh the ingredients. So most of the things will automatically happen. Your one hand will start chopping the onion, the other one will fetch the salt, one hand will adjust the flame, right? The other one will automatically do the stirring. So obviously you will be doing multitasking, and at the same time you are also chatting to your child. So any sort of a planning or a thinking is needed, because this is happening automatically. In fact, I have experienced this. When you know the dish and when it automatically happens, right, that becomes a kind of what is the right thing we can say here? It is just a spontaneous set of actions or activities happening through us, correct? There is no need of a planning or a thinking. And again, do you need any special effort to, bend your hand, bend your elbow, to stir the thing inside the pot? Every action is just unfolding, right? Every action is just happening. It is quite effortless. It is just happening, seamlessly happening. We are, when we are in this kind of a situation, you can say that we are completely immersed in a kind of a flow. Now assume all of a sudden the phone rings and you are a senior, or you are getting a call from your organization reminding about a kind of a deliverable or a deadline that you have to meet, right? And that senior is also saying that we need to prepone, though you know in the back of the mind that deadline or the deliverable which is going to happen. So now the senior is saying you need to postpone it, you need to really be ahead of schedule, or you need to act immediately. So what will happen? Your mind will snap back. All the heavy thoughts will start coming into the mind. I have to do a lot of things to meet this kind of a priority. How am I going to handle it? So in the middle of the cooking, that easiness which you were having is now lost. The hands will start freezing, or the knife will stop do the cutting, or you may smell something burning. That ease has vanished. So now the child is asking, what happened? All of a sudden you got a call, and then what is happening? So I think you all might have experienced this kind of situation, correct? All of a sudden, in that flow, something spontaneously happens, and that distracts the mind. Correct. I hope you all have faced this kind of a situation. That the ease all at a sudden gets vanished. So now we ourselves can see the changes happening. Right. I was quite okay before the call. Now, after the call, right, I'm not able to concentrate. I am not able to have that easiness. So now you are back to a situation that the mind is completely blurred. Lot of weight of the activity or the conversation that happened over the phone. Now let us see what has happened in this kind of a situation. So when the cooking got started, who was actually doing it? The body spontaneously knew that, right, this kind of actions should happen with the help of the mind, and mind was very quiet, and actions happen very effortlessly in its own way. But the moment the I, that sort of anxiety or a kind of an ego that started controlling the mind, obviously the tensions also started coming. And the previous state was called as the effortless state. That's where the psychology says the state or the flow, a state where the total absorption happens, and that effortless state is called as flow. See, in other situations also, so when we are playing a sport or performing a music, or when we are deeply immersed into a problem, or maybe the doctor when he or she does a surgery, the kind of absorption. See, a kind of a complex problem where you are fully involved. That is a state of a flow. Whereas when the mind is disturbed, when the ego comes into picture, that distractions will happen. That will distract the flow. Or another simple example is when we appear an exam. But there is a prerequisite with the proper study when we appear an exam. I think we are undergoing this state of a total absorption, the flow. So what happens in such scenarios? The feeling or the dimension of time will also disappear, right? You might have noticed this when you are fully immersed into a very interesting thing where there is no distraction. We may even forget the time after coming out of that problem, or after coming out of the execution of that problem. We ourselves sometimes say, I didn't know that, right, this much of time I was working. So this state of total absorption, this is called as flow. And this is the modern psychology has coined out the flow, where we are fully fully absorbed in the activity that we are now doing. So where the time disappears, and the actions seem to perform just like that. The body mind just responds instantly. There is no blocker. So there is a famous book by the author. That book name is Flow. The author is Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. So here he calls this phenomenon as flow. where that state is just the kind of a situation where one is fully absorbed in that, where the maximum creativity comes, the total involvement happens. And such a situation is also called as a state of transcendence. You just overcome even the difficulties when you are completely immersed into solving a problem, irrespective of the complexities of the problem. One is able to get the maximum creativity, right? And a feeling of transcendence, where the author of the flow says it's a autotelic personality. Auto meaning self, and telos meaning the God, right? Basically, one is signed up for solving a problem with the inherent or intrinsic motivation. That person does the job for the enjoyment of the activity. Like in the case of cooking a dish, it was just happening. And again, the enjoyment of the activity, and there is no much of distraction for status or money or praise or pride or anything of that sort. And when we are in this kind of a state, this flow, we will be able to transform even a routine, mundane job into exploring an opportunity, and where the deep focus will come and the personal mastery can also be applied. And here the energy is not at all wasted. There is no doubt on the self whether I will be able to do or not. There is no anxiety on the outcome. There is no resistance from the mind. There is no inner resistance. So the state is called as flow because all the cognitive resources are just channelized properly to execute the task. And also there is intrinsic motivation. That is why the experience is, felt as effortless. So the peak human actions usually occurs when we are fully absorbed. At the same time, we must also say that the peak human actions occur when the ego steps out of the way, when the ego is not there. Let us take the example of the cooking. It was seamless until the phone call came. Then the distraction happened in the mind, and then how am I going to do this? How am I going to complete this? Correct. So when the ego was not there, the human experience was at the peak. Even when we were cooking and before the call came, the peak experience was there because all the actions were happening very seamlessly. It was a multitasking, having a conversation with the child, cutting, chopping, adding the right ingredients. Everything was happening. So that's where the peak experience happened, when the mind is not distracted, when the ego is not there. In Zen and the martial arts, in their tradition, they call a term mushin. Mushin meaning, can equate it like a clear mind. a clear mind which is not having any judgment, which is not having any fear, or which is not having any self calculation. That clean mind will allow the instantaneous movements without friction. There is no much of thinking needed there. So here comes the wisdom from Bhagavad Gita, the Nishkama Karma. What is Nishkama Karma? Nishkama Karma is the situation or the state where the actions happen just through us without the ego troubling. Just focus entirely on the process, surrendering the actions to the higher truth without grasping for or without worrying for the outcome. See, where the anxiety will come and mess up when there is expectation on the outcome. Correct. So here, if the actions are surrendered to the Almighty and there is no need to have a grasp for the outcome or not worrying about the outcome, and there is no intention to have a doership there, obviously the actions will just happen naturally. The sense of being an independent doer, because the mind is not acting, right? In the state of flow also we saw that mind was not disturbing, everything was seamless. So when we do the Nishkama Karma, the mind is dormant because there is no need of mind to worry about the outcomes. There is no need for the mind to claim an ownership, an agency there. Kartrutvam is not needed, the doership is not needed. Where we usually or we naturally assume that doership, outcome orientation, etc. So that is where Bhagavan says you do the karma as Nishkama Karma. But usually what happens when we act in this world, an idea comes in our mind, correct? Idea to execute something, idea comes in the mind. Obviously we will think about the idea, we will try to harden it or materialize that idea. In that process what happens, the ego will claim an ownership and then the body will act, right? The idea comes in the mind, and while we fusion it or harden it, obviously the ego will also come and take the ownership and then take the rest of the things, like worrying about what will happen if not, if yes, what would be the kind of consequences, etc. So all those modeling the mind will do. Body will act. See, body may be acting, but in this scenario, whether the right actions are happening or not, this is the question that we all have to ask. See, the modern neuroscience says that the actions are the results of a set of complicated things, or maybe we can say intricate web of preconditions, where the element of biology will also come, the conditions will come, the conditions of the mind will come, then the environment where we are acting will come, then even the physical laws will come, whether it is right to act at this point of time or etc. So neuroscience is right, because actions are a result of lot of complicated aspects. That's where Bhagavad Gita simplifies here, saying that all those actions are performed by the forces of nature, because that is the realm of prakriti, where we may not have much control. So having that in mind, having a surrendering attitude where the mind is freed to look into the outcome or claiming an agency there, with the understanding that these elements which are needed for me to act belongs or comes from the nature, or the from the are through the forces of prakriti, the forces of nature. So what is really happening in life? We all are deluded by the ego, because we feel that I am doing, I am performing, whereas this performing belongs to the forces of nature, the prakriti. And now we claim that I am the doer, I am the reason for having this. As the neuroscience says, that the results are basically happening through the complex set of things, including the different preconditions to the vasanas, the conditioning, the space around us, the environment. Many things are there. So that's where Bhagavad Gita says they all belong to the prakriti. You cannot claim all those things. So with that understanding, you surrender all the actions to the Lord. But what is happening? We all are deluded by the ego. So that's where in the third chapter we have seen in the verse 3rd chapter 27. Prakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvasha ahankara vimoodatma kartahamidi manyade. Prakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvasha ahankara vimoodatma karta aham idi manyade. So the nature is really running the show. But still we try to claim the ownership. We are trying to gain the conviction. The ego is trying to gain the conviction that I am the doer. So what is the reason? That's where Bhagavan says avidya is the reason. The primordial ignorance. Basically, in another way we can say the misattribution of the identity. That's where the small I, the ego, is trying to claim the agency here, where the actions are happening, including the body, mind, intellect, senses, everything belongs to the prakriti. And now we are trying to misattribute the identity. As we have seen in the beginning during our dhyanam, Chatusloki Bhagavatam says that Bhagavan Sarva Bhudanam Adhyaksho Avasthido Guha. The self, the Atman, the true nature is pure awareness, and that self is changeless and effortless witness. Now the mind and all those instruments, including the ego, superimposes that I am this transient body, mind, intellect, sense. I am now the Swabhava instead of the Surupam. Swabhava meaning what? At the plane of body, mind, intellect, sense, which is ever changing. and which is bound by the cause and effect. And now the Upadhi is claiming a wrong ownership. It is mistakenly claimed as the real I instead of the truth which is within all of us. The Upadhi is now considered as the true I. And why it is happening? It is due to the avidya, it's due to the ignorance. The wrong knowing of the self. So, the wrong knowing of the self, and if we know the real self, that realization will come. That realization will come as that self is the non-doer. What is needed is basically it's an internal shift from the actions and the actor to the witness. This only will bring relief in life. This only will bring relief from anxiety. In the story that we used, the moment we got the call, the crushing weight landed on the mind. And I am 100% responsible for doing that. Will I be able to do that? So this will bring the dissolution of pride and guilt. Realizing that the self is the non-doer will bring the dissolution of pride and guilt. Because otherwise the ego will claim the individual agency. And if the ego is not allowed to act, the state of flow which we discussed, there will be the total involvement. That will just happen. And performance will become effortless. And the actions will become unburdened. So that is where the Bhagavad Gita's declaration of Nishkama Dharma or Akartrutvam, where the realization that life is already moving, acting, flowing through us, and our stress will start coming when we grab to take the steering wheel and pretend that I am only turning it around. So here Bhagavan says every moment is actually a state of flow. But what we are doing is basically with our mind and with those complexities, we are interrupting the state of flow. We are bringing a narrative so-called as the ego and mind and interrupting the flow. In the previous verses we have seen in the fifth chapter, verse number 8 and 9. Naiva kinchit karomi iti yukto manyeda tattvaved pashyan srunvan sprishan jikran ashnan gachan soban shosan pralaban visrujan grannan unmishan nimishan abhi indriyani indriyartheshu vartande iti dharayan. The everyday actions that we do, including seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, eating, walking, breathing, opening and closing of the eyelids. Correct? Are we doing any effort to do the digestion which is happening inside us? Is our ego has to monitor and control the digestion, or is our ego should be monitoring the closing and opening of the eyelids, breathing or walking. It is just simply the senses engaging with the world with the capability of that power which is within all of us. So now why are you claiming the ownership? That's where Gita Bhagavan says these two verses very, very profound. You stop claiming the ownership of the movement that the life is already doing, or the life is, it is happening through us, already doing through us, through by that force. These all are already happening. Without the burden of ego, it's happening, correct? So all those states are the moments of actual state of total absorption or flow. But our ego is coming and interrupting that. Yeah, I'm doing this. I am the reason for this. Let's take the example of digestion, or what is really happening when the body is sleeping. What is really happening inside of us? Maybe, I don't know, maybe doctors can say how the process happens, etc. But it's a very complicated system. Is it happening through the control of ego? Once a Shishya proudly told his guru that, Maharaj, I have removed my ego. Now I got the complete control of ego. I removed my ego. So now the guru smiles and says that, yeah, it's really good. It's really wonderful. So our Shishya replies, Maharaj, I don't think anyone has removed ego better than I have. See, the people around the Guru, they all laughed. Guru was just sitting calm and quiet. Then the Shishya realizes that what is making me to talk like this. I don't think anybody else has removed ego better than I have done. So I caught the thief and surrendered to the Guru. You can see a lot of stories in Upanishad. Uddhalaga, Shwetaketu, conversation in the Chandogya Upanishad. So who is taking the ownership, the agency? The ego is taking. So ego is the culprit. That is where Bhagavan now says very, very beautiful verses. These 4 verses. Let's start. Verse number 14. Na kartrutvam na karmani lokasya srajati prabhu na karma bhala samyogam swabhavastu pravartate. Na kartrutvam na karmani lokasya srajati prabhu na karma bhala sayogam swabhava tu pravartate. Na kartrutvam, there is no doership. Na karmani, doesn't do the action. For lokasya, for any person. Srajadi prabhu, meaning creating. The one who is self-effulgent, Prabhu, meaning the Atma, the inner truth, the reality within all of us. Na karma bhala sayogam, nor the connection with results of action. Swabhavaha, one's own true nature, tu pravartade, leads to action. What is the meaning here? The self, that Lord, Bhagavan Sarvabhudanam Adhyaksho Avasthido Guha, that consciousness which is pervading in all of us as the self, that Lord that doesn't create for the world a sense of agency, nor actions, nor the linking of actions to the results. Then who is doing? Then it is one's own prakriti, one's own nature that carries all of this out. The self doesn't create any doership. It is the nature, it is the prakriti. The body, mind, intellect, sense apparatus, the three gunas that perform all the activity. The self is silent. Self is the silent witness. Self is not the operator. It is basically what? The prakriti, the nature just operates. The self doesn't create any doership. Then what leads to action in one? This is the question that we all should understand. The self, the Atma, creates neither doership nor actions for anybody. Right? Not even the connection with the results of the action. It is one's own true nature that leads to the action. Meaning the guna, all the gunas, that sattvam, rajas, tamas, the combination of these gunas. And the self is existent, ever effulgent, self-effulgent. That's why Atma is called as Prabhu here. Logasya srajati Prabhu. The self-effulgent Atma is the Prabhu. So one should have the discrimination to understand the true nature. If the ajnanam is there, if the lack of discrimination is there, then one will superimpose these activities onto that truth, that Prabhu, that truth, that Atma. So here, when we say ajnanam, it's a cosmic delusion. So how to overcome the cosmic delusion? Through jnanam, through the conscious awareness. Cosmic delusion, when we say the path of impulsivity, the path of impulsive living, the way of living which is influenced by the external environment only, and conscious awareness. What is that conscious awareness? Using the inner potential and the intuitive wisdom that is provided to all of us. Srimad Bhagavatam says, Brahmava Loga Dishanam Mudam Apadeva. It is given to all human beings, but only few will understand and realize that. So what is the realization? That self as the transcendental witness. This is the witness consciousness which is unaffected by the world. It is the contactless contact. In Chatusloki Bhagavatam, Anvaya Vediregakhyam, Anvaya Vedirega Bhavam. Contactless contact. So what is contact meaning here? It is basically the apparent connection. Consciousness is illuminating every sensory perception. That includes the thought, Pralaban, Visarjan, Grannan, Unmishan, Nimishan, Abhi. Every the contact, the apparent connection, consciousness illuminates every sensory principles, every sensory perception, thoughts, emotions, and including the physical sensation. Now the question is, without the consciousness, can one experience the world? That is where it's called as the contact. Experience of the world happening due to the illumination of the consciousness. Now, contactless. Contactless meaning what? Absolute unattachment. Anvaya Vyatireka Bhavam, meaning for the subject to exist, there is no need of an object. Like a light shining on the dirt. The light reveals the dirt, correct? But the light will never get dirty, correct? The light will never get dirty, but the light reveals the dirt. Similarly, the consciousness illuminates the mental, physical objects without undergoing any change, without undergoing any modification, without having any actual physical contact. So that's where Anvayam meaning the positive co-presence, the aspect of contact. When consciousness is present, the world is experienced. And Vyatireka is basically what? The negative co-absence, the aspect of contactless. When the body, object, mind vanishes, consciousness will not vanish. Consciousness will be there still. So that is where contactless contact, the enjoyer of the fruits and the performer of the action in us is what? The ego, not the Atman. Because that Atman is pure. Like the light which is showing the dirt, but the light is not becoming dirty. So we have to understand the difference between Swabhavam and Swarupam. Swarupam is the consciousness and we are that. And Swabhavam is what? Swabhavam is basically conditioned by the Triguna. Swabhavam is conditioned by the world. Swabhavam is conditioned by the prakriti. And in reality, the Atma, the absolute nature, is never involved. But for us to experience anything, that Atma has to be there. That ever effulging truth has to be there. And that Atma is never conditioned by anything. That Atma is not affected by anything. So please understand the positive co-presence as the Anvayam and the negative co-absence as the Vyatiregam. So Atma has to be there for any experience, but when the body, mind, intellect, senses are not there, still that Atma exists. So that self is not a product of the object, not a product of the manifestation. It is not a part. So what we have to understand is, am I the Swabhavam or the Swarupam? I cannot be the Swabhavam because Swabhavam is conditioned by the prakriti, and the prakriti, basically the influence of the Sattvam, Rajas, Tamas, the Trigunam, and the Swabhavam cannot exist without Swarupam. then who truly am I? I am the Swarupam. I am the truth. Verse number 15. Nadatte kasyajit papam na chaiva sukrudam vibhu ajnanena vrudam jnanam tena muhyandi jantava. Nadatte na adatte kasyajit papam na cha eva sukrutam vibhu ajnanena avrutam jnanam tena muhyanti jantava. So, ajnanena avrutam jnanam. So, the knowledge is covered by ignorance. Tena muhyanti jantava. Due to ignorance, people are deluded. Right? And here, Vibhu, the Atma is called as Vibhu, all pervasive. Nacha eva sukrutam. And kasyajit papam, it is not affected by the punya papam. It doesn't take any roles in taking the punya papam. So the all pervading self does not accept anybody's sin or merit, papa punyam. And the knowledge is enveloped or covered by the ignorance, and due to that the beings are deluded. The self is not the scorekeeper, please understand, handling out the rewards or punishments. The apparent sin and suffering in the world arise because the knowledge gets covered by ignorance. Like the sun getting covered by the cloud. Right? The sun never creates the darkness. What happens? The cloud just blocks what was already shining. Cloud is basically covering the sight of us from the sun. And please understand that for us to see the cloud, what is needed? The sunlight is needed. And now cloud is coming and blocking that and giving a perception that there is darkness. And for us to understand that the cloud is creating this darkness, first and foremost, we should also understand that for us to see the cloud, that sunlight, that sunshine should be there. The awareness of the self is necessary to say that I am ignorant. Correct? If I have to say that I know everything, or if I say that I know most of the things but I don't know one thing, there is an awareness which is able to see that I know something and I don't know something. So it is by means of the self, the effulgence of the self, that one can say I am ignorant or I am knowledgeable. And that effulgence of the self, the very effulgence of the self is divine. Like in the light that exposes the dirt, or the sun that gets covered by the cloud, sun is not affected by the sin, or sun is not really affected by the cloud. Similarly, neither the sin nor the virtue affects the self. But what happens? Due to the moham, due to the delusion, this is basically the misapprehension of the self as jiva. And one has to understand, one has to recognize the self which is the substratum behind the body, mind, intellect, sense. Trace that I. Right. Trace that I meaning what? Trace the true I. Right now there is a false I, so called as the small I, which is coming and claiming this agency, claiming this ownership, claiming the kind of a personality which is fake. Now find out the real source of the I, and we will discover that the small I, so called as the ego, is not real. There is no existence for that small I. You all know the story of Valmiki Maharshi, the dacoit Ratnagara robbed and troubled the people who used to pass through his place where he used to loot them. When sage Narada asked him, right, a simple question: will your family share the karma of your sins? After discussing with the family, came back and said the answer is no, they are not ready. What happened? The same man, the same body sat down and became the sage Valmiki. The covering of the ignorance was lifted. The purity, the so-called as the shining sun, had been there the entire time. That truth was there in Ratnakara, but the ignorance was covering that truth, that ignorance got lifted. So now let me also bring a very simple example here. In our smartphone we have this airplane mode, correct? And if you put it in airplane mode, what will happen? You will not be able to connect to internet, or you will not be able to get calls, receive calls, or make calls. When you are putting the phone in airplane mode, is it something like the phone has lost the capability to connect, or ability to make calls permanently? Similarly, we are switching something on to block the calls. Basically, that aeroplane mode is basically a feature which is brought in to block the call for a temporary time. Similarly, we are much used to the mode of ego, which is really hiding the self, which is really not allowing us to realize that self. In the Kenopanishad, the verses Shrotrasya Shrotram Manaso Manoyat Vajoha Vajam Sau Pranasya Prana Chakshusha Chakshur Adimuchyadira Pretyasman Logad Amrada Bhavanti. The self is the ear of the ear, the mind of the mind, speech of the speech, Vajoha Vajam Sau Pranasya Prana, the life of the life, Chakshusha Chakshur, the eye of the eye, Adimuchyadira, the wise, free themselves from the identification with the senses or upadhi. They know the self as the source of awareness that enables everything to work. As per Vedantam, the unveiling of truth is equal to removal of the ignorance. It is not a new knowledge creation. There is nothing to be known from outside. It is all rediscovery or recognition. And everybody has got this free choice within. That choice is within us. Bhagavan in the 4th chapter, in the Jnana Karma Sanyasa Yogam says that, hey Arjuna, you and me differ due to one reason. I have the full control of Maya. Bhagavan says, Bahuni me vedidani janmani tava Arjuna tanyham veda sarvani natvam veda parandava ajobisan avyayatma bhudanam ishwarobisan prakritim swam adhishtaya sambhavami atmamaya. I keep Maya under control. Delusion is under my control. Hey Arjuna, please understand. So that is what the wise will do. Wise will never get deluded because this knowledge is there. Verse number 16. Jnanena tu tadajnanam yesham nashidam atmanah tesham adityavajnanam prakashayadi tatparam. Jnanena tu tad ajnanam yesham nashidam atmanah tesham adityavajnanam prakashayadi tatparam. So when the ignorance is removed, self is revealed as the Brahman. When the ignorance is removed, the self is revealed. Where it was previously covered in the darkness. Let's take the example of a dark room. Assume that this room was covered for many years. Now you open the window. What happened? The darkness vanishes instantly. Though it was closed for many years, will it take many years to become bright? The moment that you open the windows, light will come inside. Regardless of how many years or how much time the room was blocked or closed. Similarly, the moment this discrimination comes, the ignorance will go, knowledge will come, and it will happen instantaneously. A man was walking home back at the twilight in the evening. I mean the yama, basically the change of time. And suddenly he became very much frightened, because in front of him he saw a kind of a snake, a coiled dangerous cobra. Screamed, cried for help. A passerby just walked. He was coming from the other side and he just flashed the light. He just flashed the light on the ground. And it got revealed that it was just a piece of old jute rope. The passerby did not kill the snake. What did he do? He just simply shone a light. So, whether the snake existed before, only the fear of snake was there, correct? Snake never existed. Similarly, the removal of ajnanam, the obstruction, where the light comes as jnanam and reveals that it is just a rope. Or another example, whether this sun is rising at 6 a.m. for us to begin the day, or can you say that sun is not there, sun is set, sun has gone for sleep. Sun is not traveling anywhere, correct? And it is not just created at 6 a.m. so that we will experience the day from 6 a.m. The earth simply turned the face to the sun, towards the sun. Similarly, the self-knowledge works in the same way. Turn the mind towards what was always present. There is not even a time that the self is not there. Right? Sun is always there. When you turn the world towards the sun, you get the day. You will start seeing the day. Similarly, when you turn the mind towards that self is always there, like the sun. So one has to keep the mind and intellect to focus to that self, to give attention to that self. Verse number 17. Tad buddhayas tadatmanam tat nishta tat parayana gacchantya punaravrittim jnana nirdhuda kalmasha. Tad buddhaya tat atmana tat nishta tat parayana gacchanti apuna avrittim jnana nirdhuda kalmasha. Tad buddhayas tadatmana tannishta tatparayana gacchanti apunaravrittim jnana nirdhuda kalmasha. The self, the Atman is tad buddhaya tad atmana tad nishta tad parayana. The self, the Atman is Brahman. Those who have their intellect absorbed in that self, the one who has got steadfastness in that self, the one who has got conviction in that self, the one who has got goal in that self, such a person or such a personality resonates with the eternal essence, with that Brahman. Our Shruti says Brahma with Brahmaiva Bhavati. So the ultimate answer is to know who am I. So once the intellect, the buddhi, is anchored in the self meaning the highest goal, not occasionally, always the buddhi is anchored in that self. And what happens? Apuna avrittim. There is no reason to return. Right? So when the buddhi is dominantly residing in that self, there is no issue of fluctuation, because the fixed reference point is very clear. I am the true self. The buddhi has that conviction. There is no falling back into confusion. See, we all know the story of Prahladan and Hiranyakashipu, right? Hiranyakashipu consistently troubled the Prahladan through through different ways to shake his son's devotion in Narayana. Different torturing Hiranyakashipu gave to Prahladan, but nothing worked out. Correct? Nothing worked out, because the Prahlada's buddhi was genuinely fixed in that self, in that Narayana. That is called as the state of no return. It is not something like the one who has got self-knowledge will permanently go away or something like that. Not like that. There is no confusion, there is no dangling in their life. It is completely fixed, because the buddhi has that clarity that I am that self. So now the mind will cooperate to see the self which is beyond and behind. There is no state of return. But for that, the mind has to be conducive enough, cooperative enough to know this reality. That is where whole principle of karma was karma yoga, karma sanyasam with the knowledge. Tad buddhaya, tad atma, tad nishta, tad parayana. Tad meaning what? In that. Intellect is fixed in that. Tad nishta, tad atmana, tad parayana. For the ones who their ultimate goal is that, there is no return. The power of jnanam, that is what these verses are depicting. The power of jnanam is very much needed for the removal of ignorance. And that only will bring the zenith of experience in all of us. What is that zenith of experience? Realizing the self, realizing that God. And we are not this petty body, mind, intellect, senses, where the mind brings the assumed personality or the superficial personality and bring this agency, bring this doership. These all are at the realm of ignorance. What matters is basically that knowledge, the power of jnanam is very much important for removing the ignorance. That only will bring the peak of experience in all of us. That's what these verses are conveying to us. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnavadaya Purnamevavashishyati. Om Shanti Shanti